The first time you walk into a house that's been destroyed by fire, it's not the sight that hits you first, it's the smell. That thick, heavy scent of things that were once beautiful, once useful, now reduced to black soot and gray ash. I don't know about you, but I've met a lot of people lately who feel like their lives smell like smoke. Maybe it's a marriage that collapsed after 20 years. Maybe it's a career you spent a decade building in this country, only to watch it crumble in a single board meeting or a single bad season. You look at the pile of debris and you think, there is nothing left to use here. It's over. We have this idea that God only works with brand new materials. We think he needs a clean slate and a fresh shipment of perfect bricks to build something great. But the story of Nehemiah tells us something completely different. It tells us that our God is a master of the ruins. He doesn't wait for the rubble to be cleared before he shows up. He stands right in the middle of the ash and says, "Watch what I can do with this." In Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 20, we find a man standing before a city that had been a graveyard of dreams for nearly a century. The walls of Jerusalem weren't just down, they were charred. The gates weren't just broken, they were consumed by fire. When Nehemiah arrived, the locals didn't see a construction site, they saw a trash heap. But look at what Nehemiah tells his enemies. The God of heaven will give us success. We, his servants, will start rebuilding. Notice he doesn't say, the king of Persia gave me a big budget, or I have the best engineers in the world. He points to the God of heaven. In the Hebrew mindset, calling him the God of heaven was a way of saying he is the one who sits above every earthly limitation. He is the architect who doesn't need a hardware store because he owns the universe. Nehemiah understood that the rebuilding process doesn't start with the stones, it starts with the source. If you are waiting for your circumstances to look rebuildable before you start trusting God, you're missing the point of faith. Faith is the ability to look at a burnt stone and see a cornerstone. It's the ability to hear the mockery of the Sanballas in your life. Those voices that say, it's too late, or you've failed too many times, and answer them with the authority of the God who restores. There is a powerful detail in the book of Nehemiah that I love. The enemies of Israel mocked the builders, saying, will they revive the stones out of the heaps of rubbish and burned ones at that? Think about that phrase, burned stones. When a stone is burned in an intense fire, it becomes brittle. It loses its structural integrity. It cracks. It's considered useless for building. But God told Nehemiah to pick up those very stones, the ones that had been through the fire, and put them back into the wall. This is the heart of the gospel. God doesn't throw you away because you've been through the fire. He doesn't discard you because your history is full of burnt chapters. In fact, some of the strongest parts of the wall in Jerusalem were made of stones that had survived the heat. Your scars, your failures, the things the enemy tried to use to destroy you. In the hands of the great rebuilder, those things become the very materials of your restoration. He takes the burnt parts of your testimony and uses them to create a wall of protection that the enemy can't penetrate again. So how does this change your Monday morning? How do you actually start rebuilding when you feel like you're standing in a pile of ash? First, you have to stop looking at the ruins and start looking at the architect. Nehemiah spent time in prayer and fasting before he ever picked up a trowel. He got God's perspective on the mess. If you're trying to fix your life with just your own hands, you're going to get exhausted by Tuesday. You need the God of heaven perspective. Second, you have to be willing to work with what's left. Don't wait for a new life to start serving God. Start rebuilding with the stones you have right now, even the cracked ones, even the burnt ones. Maybe your family isn't perfect, but start building a prayer life right there in the middle of the mess. Maybe your finances are a wreck, but start being faithful with the little bit you have. Nehemiah's wall was built section by section. Families worked on the part of the wall right in front of their own houses. Don't worry about the whole city yet. Just focus on the burnt stone right in front of you today. I want to challenge you this week. Stop apologizing for your ruins. The world sees a pile of rubbish, but God sees a masterpiece in progress. The same God who looked at the void in Genesis and saw a world, and the same God who looked at a tomb and saw a resurrection, is looking at your life right now. He isn't finished. He isn't intimidated by your fire. This week on my social media, I'm going to be dropping short reflections on how to handle the specific obstacles that come up when you start to rebuild. how to handle the critics, how to handle the exhaustion, and how to find beauty in the ashes. But today, I want you to make a decision. Stand up in your ruins, look the enemy in the eye, and declare Nehemiah 2:20 over your house. Say it with me. The God of heaven will give us success. The rebuilding doesn't start when the problems go away. It starts the moment you decide that the architect is greater than the ash. Let's get to work.